Diversity in living organisms is the next chapter. So here we are going to study about the living organisms that are generally we see in the natural world. With our naked eyes we can see different organisms. Basically they include plants and animals. If you go to a park, you see different kind of plants or trees, and you see grass, and you see different people. So you see different organisms, but what is the range of the difference? So there is not very much difference you find there. If you go to a park, you see the grass carpet. You find all the grass plants are similar, same. And you see so many people are coming. In terms of science, if you see that there, what kind of animals you see? Only humans you see. Rarely you find other animals. Of course, if somebody is taking their dog out, pet dogs, you may see dogs. But if you go to a jungle, if you go to a forest, then if you see that there, what kind of different things you see? If you go to a thick forest, you find different kind of plants which are not similar. They're entirely different from each other. And you find the plants of different forms. You find certain plants are thin, weak, creepers. You find climbers, and you find bushes, and you find big trees, and you find giant trees which grow up to meters of height, 10 meters, 20 meters, 30 meters, and sometimes we find trees which grow up to a height of even 100 meters. Giant redwood trees of California. So this way, if you go to a forest, that means if you go to a natural setup, not a park or a shopping mall, if you go to a natural setup, you find so many kinds of plants. And if you observe the animals, what sort of animals you find in a forest? You find so many insects and various birds and many animals like squirrels, rats, mongoose, squirrels, and you find rabbits. What else you find there? You find fox, you find deer, and you may find tigers. Sometime in some of the forest you find tigers, elephants, giraffes. So there are so many animals of various kind in the forest. So if you go to a natural setup, if you observe a natural setup, you find a lot of diversity. What is this called as a diversity? Not similar. You go to a paddy field, a crop, what do you find there? In a paddy field, you find thousands of paddy plants. You go to a wheat field, so there you find thousands of wheat plants growing, all are alike. Would you call it as a diversity? No. If you go to your lawn, you see your lawn, the grass consists of all similar kind of plants. So that is not diversity. So what the term diversity refers to variety of organisms are there. So this blue planet Earth has got a variety of living forms, variety. So what is the range of this variety? Millions and millions and species of animals are there. So far no one has completely counted how many different species of organisms are there on this planet. Still they are finding different species which are not yet studied, not yet observed. There are many more places. There are certain places, even though the area of the land is small, it consists of large variety of organisms. One of such example is a Galapagos Island. So there are certain islands which consist of very beautiful, interesting creatures with very different peculiar form and functions. Variety of birds, variety of insects, plenty of things are there in this world. So far I am talking about the things which we can see with our naked eyes, plants and animals. Beyond that, there are many creatures, living things that are existing in this world which we cannot see with our naked eye. So what are those? So we talked about plants and we talked about animals. The things that we cannot see are microorganisms. Microorganisms are the organisms which can be seen with the help of a microscope are called as microorganisms. There are a variety of microorganisms, number of species, number of classes, groups in microorganisms. So if you see the range, what is the range of these organisms? What sort of difference is existed between the variety of organisms? You see the microorganisms, their length is micrometers, μm, microns, very small, 1000th or 10,000th part of 1 millimeter on your scale. You can imagine how much small they are. You have a ruler in your compass box and it will be having the measurement. So in that the least measurement is 1 mm. You make it into 1000 parts, how small it is. So that is a micrometer. You make it 10,000 part, how small it is. So those are the sizes in which these microorganisms exist. So just imagine how small they are. So this world, it consists of very tiny organisms. So tiny. The microorganisms are very tiny. So the range, what is the range? It begins at very tiny micrometers to hundreds of meters. If you take a giant redwood tree, 100 meters height, it grows 100 meters height. So that is the range. That is also one living organism, this microbe also one organism. Then what is the difference? See the difference. If you see an animal, you can see a blue whale. What is the size of a blue whale? So big. We can find that the size of the blue whale is very big. You can see the other animals, a rat, how small the rat is. Very small. You see the blue whale, very big. Of course, both belongs to same group. Both belongs to mammals. But in the same group itself, see how much of difference. If in the same group that much of difference is there, in between different groups of animals and plants, how many differences are there? Then how do we study all these organisms? Is it possible for a person to study about each and every organism on this planet in his lifetime? Certainly not. It's not possible. No one can study about each and every organism on this planet individually, even though he spent all his lifetime. It is not possible. Then what is the way? Then how we can understand this diversity? So understanding the diversity, it helps to preserve the diversity. The first major thing is we have to conserve the diversity. So somebody may think, what is the benefit we have, mankind? If we go to a forest and protect all the plants and animals of different varieties, what benefit we get? Because always we think in the aspect of development, we think in the aspect that what benefit we have. Definitely we have a benefit. If this diversity is missing on this planet, the balance in the ecosystem is disturbed. So by that the living of mankind is questionable. So the diversity is very important. We need to preserve the diversity. So that is the reason why we should study the diversity. But how can we study the diversity? How can we study about all these organisms? On what basis we do that? What is the basis? Let us see. What is the basis of classification? So we discussed that there is a lot of variety of organisms, and whatever the time we have, it's not sufficient to study these organisms separately, individually. One by one you cannot study these organisms. Then how? How can we study these organisms? Whatever the variety, millions of species are found, we can study these organisms in groups. So you need to group them. You are given different items to you, different objects are given to you, and you are asked to group them. How do you do that? So you are given some kind of a toys, different kind of toys, and you are asked to separate them. How do you do that? So you can separate it, you can group them, you can take certain things. So you are given some toys. So these toys, there are some cars, some top, some shapes. So likewise, different toys are given. On basing what you will make the classification, make the grouping, based on some feature, based on some character, based on the appearance. You see that here you can categorize them soft toys, that are teddy bears and such kind of things as soft toys, and you can take the other thing as hard toys, and you can separate them, the plastic ones separate, plastic toys, or you can separate them based on the color, plastic in the sense you can separate them based on material. So material is the character. Here you are considering the material based on material. Some are made out of plastic, some are made out of wood. So based on the material you can divide, based on the color you can divide them. Some are red, some are green, some are blue. So you make three groups: blue, green, red. So likewise, on basing the color you can, and size, small, medium, big, based upon the size. So in this way there are so many criteria based on which you can divide them. Toys played by boys and girls, you can do that. So there are so many ways by which you can do the classification, but finally there should not be any confusion in that. So that is the way you have to make the division. So you must choose the best criteria to make the grouping. So that is what called as this classification. So on basing what the classification of organisms is done, on basing what the organisms are classified, Greek philosopher Aristotle, he classified the organisms to that are living on land and living in water. So can we take this criteria, living in a particular place, as a basic idea of classification, the basis of classification? Say for example, living in the water, it consists of starfish, octopus, blue whale. So you see what is the various kind of difference here: shark or any other small fish, seahorse. So are they all similar? No. You see the corals are also animals. They are the sedentary, they are the fixed animals. So if you see their internal functioning, their internal organ system, their feeding, everything is different. They are not matching with each other. So they have a lot of differences. The only common similarity is their habitat, they are living in water. So it is invalid. You cannot take such a criteria to classify or to group the organisms. So if you do so, based upon the habitat they are living in water, if you group all of them together, one group. If you study any one organism, you cannot apply that study to all these organisms because they are different. Now, you know the present classification, all the birds are classified under aves. Aves are the birds. So if you study any particular bird, most of the things are similar with all the other birds. If you study the digestion pattern of a bird, you can apply that to all the birds. Most of the birds will be having the similar. Right? So whatsoever study you do on one particular organism, and with less minor variations, it will be applied to the other members of the group. It should be applied to the other members of the group. So in such a way you have to classify. But this classification, you studied about blue whale, its digestion, its reproduction, its life cycle, everything. Can you apply this thing to the starfish? So can we apply the study about one member of this group to the other member? It is not possible. So this grouping is invalid. Grouping that animals living in water, animals living on land, it is invalid. So you cannot classify the organisms based on such criteria, such characteristics. So what is the basis of classification? We need to have proper characteristics. So the characteristics are the main things basing on which classification of organisms is done. So what are these characteristics? So the characteristic means it should define the appearance or behavior of an organism. Based on the appearance or behavior, based on this, we will take a grouping decision. Yes, these organisms have the similar appearance or similar functioning, so we are grouping them into this group. And what is the other important aspect I discussed here? If you study one member of that group, whatever the study you make, it should be equally applicable to other members with minor changes. Means the members which have more similarities and less differences are grouped together. And one more important thing, the members which have all the fundamental characteristics same, the other characteristics are different. The basic characteristics must be same. Then you can put them in one group. So that is what we'll see with some other examples. So we have seen that the characteristics are the basis of classification. So what are these characters? The characters means that define the appearance or behavior, form or function of an organism. You can compare the form of two different organisms to group them. You can compare the functioning of two different organisms to group them. So on basing these characteristics, we will do the classification. But organisms will have so many functions. Organisms may have different kind of appearances. That means organisms, they will be having so many similarities and dissimilarities. But which one you consider as the main character? You have to take the fundamental characters. Fundamental characters. So what are these fundamental characteristics? What are these fundamental characteristics? Let us consider a stone wall is made, a stone pillar is made. This pillar is made out of stones. You see, these are the bottommost brick of the pillar. So these three cases, take A, B, C. They are similar. Above this, so depending upon the bottom brick, to make a straight wall, you will put another brick of any other shape. So here also we have taken so now this is of another shape. So you find three pillars, but you see that the topmost bricks, they will not decide how the bottom brick should be, because these are formed first. So whenever you are making a pillar or a wall, step by step, first you put the bottom stones, the shape of the bottom stone will decide the next shape of the other stone, which one will fit there. So that means the fundamental characteristics are the bottommost or the primitive most characteristics. When you are grouping three different organisms, you cannot compare the similarities and differences between these top characteristics. You have to consider the fundamental characteristics. So here, if you see the stones of the bottom part of this pole, the basic or the primary stones are of similar shape. That means the primary characters are similar. So you can group them as one group. Yes, one group. If you look at these characteristics, you say that they are different. How can you group them? Because you have considered this characteristic. What is that fundamental characteristic? So you may get a doubt. You may ask your teacher, how can we and dogs are categorized in the same group? How can dog and we become mammals? Then how can rat and elephant be mammals? Rat, elephant, both are mammals. They are under one group. So you think that there is a lot of difference. Elephant is very big. It has got very big ears, very big body. So it moves very slow. Rat is very small. It can run. So lots of differences you find by its external form, appearance. And you say that how both of these things will fit in same group. That means you are observing these characters, the top characters. You are not looking at the fundamental characteristics. What are the fundamental characteristics? You see that there, if you see the elephant and rat, why they are called mammals? Because both of them give birth to the young ones. Rats also give birth to the young ones. Elephant also give birth to the young ones. Rats feed the young ones with milk. Elephant also feed the young ones with milk. Rat has got hair on its body. Elephant is also having hair on its body. Rat is having red color blood. Elephant is also having red color blood. Rat is having a digestive system with different parts similar to the elephant, which is having a digestive system with similar parts. Rat is having different teeth to cut and chew the food. Elephant is also having the teeth to cut and chew the food. This way, you find number of similarities. Means you have to observe the fundamental characteristic. So now, I can place this rat and elephant in the same group. What is the difference you find? Initially, you are observing one character, that is the difference in size, and you may be not accepting, and you may be wondering how these two things have come into single group. But if you see that many other areas, other characteristics, important fundamental characteristics, there are more similarities. So as they have more similarities, they are grouped together. The rat and elephant are kept in one group, and you and dog are kept in one group. So even we are also a part of this mammal group. Rats, dogs, cats, all these are, because we are warm-blooded, we give birth to the young ones, we have hairs on our body, and the young ones are fed with milk by the mother. So these are all the characters similar in all these cases. So let us see, we have seen what are the fundamental characteristics on basing which the classification is done. Now let us look at some more criteria. That is due to the advancement in technology. Microscopes were invented. People started looking at the living things at cellular level, observing with what the living things are made up of and how the structures and functions of these fundamental units called cells. So the cell biology has started, it's growing up. People are observing the inner parts of a cell and taking those difference in the form of inner structures of a cell as a criteria for classification, considering it as a fundamental characteristic basis for the classification. What they are considering, the change in the change at the cellular level. So if you take that cellular level differences, you will find these organisms that have a distinct nucleus and cell organelles, and the organisms that do not have a distinct nucleus and other materials are found in the cytoplasm. These organisms are called prokaryotes, and these are called as eukaryotes. or eukaryotic organisms. So we did a classification grouping depending upon the differences inside the cellular components, the structure of this cell. Based on that we did this classification. Again, if you take these eukaryotes, they are again divided to unicellular, multicellular. Unicellular. So what is this unicellular? They have only one cell. Eukaryotes, amoeba, paramecium, chlamydomonas, they have only one cell. Even though they are eukaryotes, they have only one cell throughout their life, whereas in other animals, multicellular organisms, they have number of cells. So these cells are grouped in tissues performing different functions. So there is a hierarchy, there is a classification, organization of these cells. The cells are differentiated into complex tissues to organs and organ systems. So that is found in these organisms. Basing upon the difference, there you find the classification. Again, at some point, you take the food as the main basis for the classification. Food. That is, if you see the organisms that contain the green pigment chlorophyll and which are capable of preparing their own food, the organisms that have chlorophyll and which can prepare their own food and which cannot prepare their own food, which capture or get their food from other organisms. So this is the basic idea which is considered to divide plants and animals, Plantae and Animalia. So why they have taken this function as a characteristics, not the appearance? For example, they can take the physical form. Here is a branch, here is a branch. Why can't you take a man? You can sort out some similarity. Yes, the tree is having a head like thing, man is having a head like thing, tree is having branches like man is having arms. It's very foolish. You cannot take the physical appearance in case of body designs to compare a plant and animal, because the functioning, the basic functioning of plants and animals is entirely different. So in this case, we cannot consider the design, appearance as a characteristic for classification. So here what is considered their functioning? The basic idea how the food is acquired by these organisms. Plants, they are photosynthetic. They carry out photosynthesis. They have chlorophyll. They prepare their own food. Whereas animals, they cannot prepare their own food. They depend on other plants or animals for their food. So this is the basic characteristic by which we divide the organisms into two major groups: plants, animals. So in this way, we have to find out the characteristics which will exactly divide the organisms into two groups. See that the groups, the members of a group will have more similarities, less differences. And if we study one particular thing, if the fundamental characteristics of all the members of a group must be similar. So that is the idea behind the basis of this classification. Now let us see the relation between classification and evolution. So classification means we know that grouping of organisms, and evolution. Evolution is how the diversity has come into the existence. The evolution tells us how this much of variety has come into the existence. It will explain. So how the variety has come. The theories of evolution, the origin of species, and the theory of evolution was given by Charles Darwin. He has written in his book how the evolution has taken place, and he has given certain examples which we will study in your next class in the lesson Heredity and Evolution. So the evolution, it gives certain ideas and hints for the process of classification or grouping. So if you see the evolutionary steps, how the organisms are evolved, you will find that different organisms, an organism will acquire some characters, some traits, some characters, new characters, Basically, we call them as variations, new variations. This organism, it develops into, it turns to some other organism which is a higher level. This is the first level you see, it comes to next level organism. So this organism A, it turns to B. Means the B will have the primitive characters of A, and along with the primitive characteristics, the fundamental characteristics, it acquired new characteristics. Right? So there are two organisms. See here, there is an organism A. This is an organism A. So in this generation, there is an organism A. Some new character has come. New trait has come into this new variation AB. And this one has got another variation AC. These two organisms, AC and AB, they have A common. That means some characteristic common, similar to their parent, but here the other characteristics are different. So this one acquired Q, R also, Q and R. This one has not acquired any other characters, it's still remaining AC. So certain organisms, they still remain primitive. Certain organisms, by the addition of variations, they will become more and more complex, right? But they will be having the fundamental character same. So if you see, this organism is A, B, Q, R. This organism is only AC, but we are keeping these two things in one group on basing this primary fundamental character A. So the process of evolution, the theory of evolution, helps us to classify the organisms, to understand on basing what the grouping is done. So here, let us see the hierarchy of classification of groups, grouping of these organisms done by the various people. Various people around the world, they tried in their own ways, own methods of classifying the organisms. But technically, they are somewhere getting a clash, difference. So by that, the organisms that they have grouped are not fitting in the groups they are selected. So among those, here we see some people who have made their contributions in giving a proper classification with very least issues, in which we can easily study the organisms in groups. So you see the first one, Ernst Haeckel in 1894, he has given the classification of organisms. Then Robert Whittaker in 1959, he has given the 5 kingdom classification of organisms, which include Monera, Protista, fungi, plantae, animalia. So these are the 5 major groups in which into the organisms are divided. It was proposed by Robert Whittaker. So what are the 5 groups? Monera, Protista, fungi, plantae, animalia. So on basing what he has divided the organisms into these groups. First thing, cell structure. So these are the primary criteria he considered, the characteristics he considered to make this kind of division. The first one is cell structure, and the second one is mode of nutrition. Third one, body organization. So how their bodies are organized. So these are the 3 things he considered to make this 5 kingdom classification, which is very popular, which we are studying right now, the 5 kingdom classification of Whittaker. So later, Carl Woese in 1977, so this was done in 1959, later in 1977, he made some change to this Monera group. So what is the modification he did is Arachidobacteria, and Eubacteria. So this is the little modification he has given to the 5 kingdom classification of Whittaker. So these are the 5 major groups of organisms, and these groups are made into subgroups. Let us see how the hierarchy is done for these subgroups. So now let us look at the hierarchy. Here we have seen the first major grouping, the 5 kingdom classification. Monera, Protista, Fungi, Animalia, Plantae, Animalia. So these are the 5 kingdoms. So all the organisms on this planet are divided into 5 kingdoms. Monera kingdom, Protista kingdom, Fungi kingdom, Plantae kingdom, Animalia kingdom. So the kingdom is the topmost group, and every kingdom will have so many phylums. In case of animals, you call them as phylums. In case of plants, you call them as divisions. In case of plants, you call them as divisions. So either the phylum or division. In case of animal, the phylum will have so many classes. A kingdom will have number of phylums. The phylums, each phylum will have number of classes. Each class will have number of orders. Each order will have number of families. Each family will have number of genus. Each genus will have number of species. So this is the way how the hierarchy of classification is done. So if you take one organism, that organism, it will have a species, it fits into a species, and other organisms of the same species, of different species which have some similarities, they fit into same genus. Organisms are different genus which fit into the same family, they come to the family, here to order, here to class, here to the phylum. So this is the hierarchy, begins with kingdom, phylum or division, class, order, family, genus and species. If you observe this, if you take any animal, for example, if you take some animals of one species, you will find maximum similarities. For example, humans you have taken, humans are one species, Homo sapiens sapiens. Humans, they have maximum similarities, very less differences. Right? So if you go to the higher level, if you take any of these phylums, or if you take any class or order, you will find organisms with more differences. If you go up in this hierarchy, the differences between the organisms becomes more, similarities becomes less. Right? If you come down, the differences become less and similarities becomes more. If you take some members of a genus, differences are more when compared to the members of a species. If you take some members of a family, if you compare the members of a genus, the members of the genus will have less differences, more similarities. The members of a family will have more differences, less similarities when these two are compared. So we are going up, then the differences will be more and similarities will be less. So we have seen the basis of classification, relation between classification and evolution. So we have seen the different kinds of classifications given by different people. So there we have seen Robert Whittaker has given 5 kingdom classification, which is the most accepted classification of organisms, which consists of 5 kingdoms. The first one is Monera out of the 5 kingdoms. The second one is Protista, and the third one is Fungi. The fourth one is Plantae, and the fifth one is Animalia. These are the 5 major kingdoms into which all the living organisms fall under these 5 kingdoms. So among these 5 kingdoms, first we are discussing the 3 kingdoms here: Monera, Protista, Fungi. Later we discuss about Plantae and Animalia. So let us look at the Monera. Monerans are the most primary organisms that have very simple body structure. So they are prokaryotic organisms. You know what are prokaryotic organisms? The organisms that do not have a distinct nucleus and cell organelles. So they are unicellular. Even in their cells, they do not have a specific nucleus. Means their nuclear material is not enveloped by a membrane. See, we are eukaryotic. If you take any cell of your body and if you observe it under microscope, your cell will have distinct nucleus. Nucleus is enveloped by nuclear membranes. And you see the other organelles covered by some membrane. So that is seen in eukaryotic organisms, but whereas these monerans are prokaryotic in nature, that means they do not have a specific nucleus or cell organelles. So that is the one feature we observe. And the next one is, some of them, they have cell walls. Some of them do not have cell wall, but some have a cell wall. Some of the monerans have cell wall, some have cell wall, some do not. Anyway, if you come to plant and animalia, based on the cell wall they are divided. The organisms that have that specific cell wall, those are all plants, all the plants they have cell wall, animals do not have cell wall. But whereas here in case of these monerans, some monerans may have cell wall, some do not have. Let us see that the mode of nutrition in monera, what kind of nutrition they take. Some are autotrophic and some are heterotrophic. Certain monerans, they can synthesize their own food. That means they show both the modes of nutrition like autotrophic as well as heterotrophic mode of nutrition. And the examples of the monerans. So what are the organisms that fall under this category? Blue-green algae, cyanobacteria. These are the examples of monera. Blue-green algae, cyanobacteria. So now let us move to the next group, Protista. So the Protista is a bit higher compared to the monerans. Protista, it includes the unicellular organisms that are eukaryotic in nature. These are also unicellular, but their cell structure has got defined nucleus, specific cell organelles. So the nucleus and organelles are membrane bound, that is found in Protista. And another important feature that we observe in this Protista is certain organisms in Protista, they have appendages. Appendages means special structures on their body surface which help them in a specific function. See, for example, in case of a paramecium, paramecium is a Protista. Chlamydomonas, they have some cilia or whip-like structures. So these cilia or whip-like structure help these organisms to get the food, to protect, for movement. So the special arrangements like cilia which help the organisms or called as appendages are present in this Protista. And if you see their mode of nutrition, some are autotrophic, some are heterotrophic. Certain protozoans, certain protists have photosynthetic pigments to carry out photosynthesis to prepare their own food, certain do not. So both kind of nutrition is found there, autotrophic as well as heterotrophic. Let us see the examples of Protista. What falls under this category? Algae, Spirogyra. So that is an algae, Chlamydomonas, Spirogyra, and diatoms. Diatoms are the very minute organisms that are found in the water. So the organisms like amoeba, euglena, paramecium, Chlamydomonas, these are all comes under this protozoans. And so these are the examples of Protista. Now let us see that fungi. Fungi are the organisms which are eukaryotic in nature. Most of the fungi are multicellular, that is they have certain level of complexity compared to the first two kingdoms, and yeast is a unicellular fungi. Now their cell structure is eukaryotic in nature, they have a defined nucleus and distinct cell organelles, so they are eukaryotic. And the mode of nutrition is fungi are purely heterotrophic. Fungi cannot prepare their own food and they are heterotrophic in nature. So they absorb the nutrients from decaying matter. So that kind of nutrition is called as saprophytic mode of nutrition. So what is this saprophytic mode of nutrition? That is obtaining the nutrients from the decaying, dead and decaying matter, you call it as a saprophytic mode of nutrition, which is found in this group of organisms called fungi. And these fungi, they have one more special feature, their cell walls contain a hard substance called as chitin. Chitin is the hard material present in the cell walls of this fungi. The fungi in association with blue-green algae, fungi plus blue-green algae, cyanobacteria. So the fungi in combination with this blue-green algae, they live together by giving the things mutually, that is with a mutual understanding, with mutual benefits. They make their existence or living by staying together, the fungi and blue-green algae, which you call it as symbiosis. Symbiosis. So this combination of this fungi and blue-green algae together called as lichens. So we find these lichens on the bark of the trees. Lichens, right? So this is about the third kingdom, fungi. Monera, Protista, fungi. So what are the other two remaining two? Plantae and Animalia. So now we are going to learn about the Plantae and what are the subgroups of Plantae and Animalia, and what are the subgroups of Animalia. Now let us see the classification or the subdivision of the kingdom Plantae. So the Plantae is mainly classified into two main groups. Under two main groups you can study Cryptogame and Phanerogame. Cryptogams and Phanerogams. So under this Cryptogame, what do we see here? The first one is Thallophyta, Bryophyta, Pteridophyta. So these are the three divisions we see here. The Thallophyta, it comes under the Plantae, but it has got a very basic structure. The body is not well defined. Differentiation is not done. That means plant, if somebody says plant, if I say plant, what do you imagine? You imagine a stem, root, leaves, flowers, fruits, buds, everything. So that is a well differentiated plant. But whereas here Thallophyta is a plant which is not having any special structure like root, this is stem, you cannot differentiate. It will be like a green filament. So generally what do we call these green filaments? As algae. Multicellular algae comes under this Thallophyta. Whereas in Protista we studied algae, that is unicellular algae. In Protista, unicellular algae they fall under Protista, but multicellular algae that comes under this Thallophyta. What are the multicellular algae? Spirogyra, Chara, Cladophora, Ulothrix. These are the multicellular algae which have many cells. Spirogyra filaments are there. You can find the Spirogyra filaments in water tanks. You can observe them under a microscope. You will find some kind of structures in that green filaments. Those are the multicellular algae which fall under this Thallophyta. So the next group is the Bryophyta. If you see the Bryophyta here, there is a little differentiation in the body. Not like Thallophyta, they have some distinction. But they do not have an actual special tissues for conduction and all. Bigger plants, they have xylem and phloem tissues for conduction of water and mineral salts. We studied this in the chapter of tissues. But such kind of special tissues are not found in Bryophyta. So there is no special tissue for conduction of water and food in Bryophyta. But they are somewhat look like some plantlets, tiny plantlets, right? So what are the examples? Moss, Funaria. Funaria is called as moss in general terms, Machantia. So these are the examples of the Bryophyta. And this Thallophyta, Bryophyta, and the third one is Pteridophyta. The third one, let us see what is the development here in Pteridophyta. We found some development from Thallophyta to Bryophyta. Now let us see what is the development in Pteridophyta. Here you see the roots, leaves and stem. The body is differentiated into stem, root and leaves. You can see them. They have special tissues for conduction of water. So that is the improvement from this Thallophyta. But what these three have in common to keep under Cryptogame? Why this Thallophyta, Bryophyta, Pteridophyta are called as Cryptogame? Means they must have something in common. Otherwise they are not kept under one group. What is the common? The common thing is the mode of reproduction. They have naked embryos. They have spores for reproduction. So all these three, they have spores for reproduction. Among these three, these two do not have a differentiated body structure. What is that? Thallophyta, Bryophyta. Pteridophyta is having a well differentiated root system. That is a root, stem, leaf distinction is there. But however, they reproduce by spores, all these three. And the examples of Pteridophyta are Marsilia, ferns, horsetails. Ferns. We see ferns. And Marsilia and horsetails. Ferns are seen in the bushes, in the rocky areas. You find small plants. They do not bear any flowers. So that is, they bear the spores on the underside of their leaves and they reproduce by the help of these spores. So the embryos are seen outside. That characteristic is called as the naked embryos. That is called as cryptogame. Cryptogame. So that is the naked seeds. So now let us go to the next one, Phanerogame. Phanerogame consists of two kind of things, gymnosperms and angiosperms. The angiosperms divided to monocot and dicot. So here you find the real plants and trees, what you see around you. The bigger trees and plants, the fruit plants, flower plants, the grains, paddy, vegetables and different kind of plants and trees, what you see, which have commercial usage, all those plants, they come under this. Now let us see why they are called gymnosperms and what comes under this, and let us see what are angiosperms and what comes under that. So now let us look at that. The Plantae, it has got cryptogams and phanerogam. The cryptogams, they consist of Thallophyta, Bryophyta, Pteridophyta, whereas the phanerogamae, they have the gymnosperms and angiosperms. So what are these phanerogamae? The phanerogamae, it consists of two groups. So these are the plants that have a well differentiated bodies with good vascular tissues. They have distinct stem, root, leaves and all this kind of differentiation. But even then they are categorized into two groups. Why? Here these gymnosperms, they have naked embryos, naked seeds. Naked seeds. So these group, it consists of seeds that are present outside their bodies. So you call it as a naked seed. The seed is outside the body, that is outside the fruit. The fruit, they do not bear any fruits which contain seeds. They consist of cones. On the cones, the seeds are present. Means the seeds are present outside. So these kind of plants are called as gymnosperms. Sperma means seed, gymno means out. So that they have the characteristic of naked seeds. And how these plants are, they grow up to big trees. They are perennial. They live for a number of years. They are evergreen. Evergreen in the sense they do not shed their leaves. Always they will be having the leaves, and they are woody. That means their trunks are very much woody, which is used as a wood for furniture and all. You see the deodar and pine. These two are the examples of these gymnosperms. Then what are these angiosperms? Angiosperms. Here angiosperms means angio, closed, sperms, seeds. The seeds are enclosed in a fruit. See, for example, a mango. You see that mango consists of one seed inside the mango. So the seed is present inside the mango. It is protected. Seed is having a seed coat. Inside the seed, what will be there? In case of this, inside the seed, there will be cotyledons. If you open and see a seed, a bean seed, you will find some thick leaf-like structures, two leaf-like structures, and there you will see a baby plant here, embryo. So certain plants, they have the seeds which has got one cotyledon, that is monocot. Monocot means one cotyledon. If the seed contains one cotyledon, you call it as monocot. If the seed contains two cotyledons, dicot. So the angiosperms are divided into two, monocots and dicots. What is this cotyledon? What does it do with? If you see a seed like a bean seed, it will have two cotyledons. If once the seed is germinating, you can find that there, the cotyledons, they become green like leaf-like structures. So it shows that in case of dicot plants, the seed itself consists of a tiny plant in that. The embryo is supported by cotyledons. They contain the stored food. The food is stored in the cotyledons which help the embryo to grow up. How many cotyledons are there? Two cotyledons in case of a dicot. Monocot means only one cotyledon will be there. What are the examples of monocot? All grass plants, rice, wheat, jowar, bajra, all kind of cereal plants, grass plants, bamboo, all these are monocots. Dicots means you see mango and peas, beans. If you break the seed, if you get two equal halves inside the seed, you consider it as a dicot plant, dicotyledonous plant. So monocots and dicots. So these two come under the group angiosperms. So phanerogamae divided to gymnosperms and angiosperms. In gymnosperm, we find the plants that have a naked seeds. They have cones. Cones consist of seeds directly without any fruit. Whereas in angiosperms, they have fruits which enclose the seeds. So again, depend upon the number of cotyledons, they are divided to monocot and dicot. Monocots have only one cotyledon, dicots have two cotyledons to support the growth of embryo. So this is the classification of the kingdom Plantae. So next we see the classification of the fifth kingdom, the last kingdom and the biggest kingdom, which consists of number of creatures, that is the Animalia. Now in the animal kingdom, let us see that Animalia, it has got what are the subgroups here? The phylum Porifera, phylum Coelenterata, Platyhelminthes, Nematoda, Annelida, Arthropoda, Mollusca, Echinodermata and Protochordata. So again we see so many subgroups in this Protochordata. Let us see this, the first one, the Porifera. So Porifera are the animals which are sedentary. That means they cannot move from place to place. They do not have well differentiated body parts, body organs, and they do not have a well differentiated body systems even for conduction of water or whatsoever. So the example, the best example of Porifera is a sponge, Cycon. Sponges that are found in the floor of the seas, there we find underwater organisms, so which are fixed to a solid object. They get fixed to a solid object and they have very little differentiation. They do not have a very much differentiation of tissues and organs, and they have some pores and canals through which the water and food materials are flowing through the canals. So that sort of arrangement they have, and they have a hard outer skeleton. Outside they are hard. That skeleton is made up of certain kind of minerals found in the sea. So that is the Porifera example. Cycon, Spongilia, Eucleptelia, these are the examples. Cycon, Spongilia, Euplectelia, these are the examples of the Porifera. Now let us see the second phylum, Coelenterata. The Coelenterata has got a bit of higher differentiation compared to Porifera. It has got two layers of cells. So it is having a sort of cavity kind of thing. So that is the reason why it is called a Coelenterata. Coelenterata means coelom, means cavity. So these are the animals, the first animals which is showing some kind of cavity kind of thing, which it's not a true coelom. So they are showing a cavity kind of thing. They have two layers of cells. So outer layer, inner layer like this. Hydra is an example. Two layers of cells, outer layer, inner layer. They are solitary or colony, means they live in colonies, groups, or they live free, individual. Examples, jellyfish, sea anemone. Jellyfish and sea anemone are the examples of the group Coelenterata. The third phylum, Platyhelminthes. What is this Platyhelminthes? They are the flatworms, generally called as flatworms. Platyhelminthes is called as flatworms. Why these worms are called as flat? They are compressed, dorso-ventrally compressed. Dorso-ventrally compressed. What is the dorsal? This is the dorsal side, this is the ventral side. If both sides are pressed there, you will find it like a thin flap. How is the leaf? Leaf is compressed. It is not round, leaf is flat. In such a way, the animals whichever fall under this phylum Platyhelminthes, they have flat bodies. What features we identify here is bilateral symmetry is identified here. What is this bilateral symmetry? Let us see here. Planaria is a flatworm. This is a planaria. If you see this organism, if you cut this organism into exactly two halves, both the halves will be mirror images. Means both the sides it will be having same appearance. This is called as bilateral symmetry. Even we have a bilateral symmetry. See, if you draw a line exactly center of your body, you will find both the halves similar. Right? How the left side is there, exactly the right side will be like that. So that is called bilateral symmetry. If you cut any organism vertically, then you will find both the halves similar. That is called as bilateral symmetry is observed in this Platyhelminthes. And moreover, they are triploblastic. They have ectoderm, endoderm and mesoderm. Three cavity kind of things to accommodate organs. They are having, of course, even though they are not having true coelom, okay, for the accommodation of the organs. So triploblastic in nature, they are flattened dorsoventrally, both sides they are flattened, and most of these animals which fall under this Platyhelminthes phylum, they live parasitic mode of nutrition. They are the worms of our bodies, worms of the bodies of animals. They live in the intestines. Example, tapeworm. Tapeworm is a very lengthy, flat, tape-like worm. It looks like a measuring tape. So that is why it is called as a tapeworm, which lives in the intestines of the cows and buffaloes. And planaria, liver fluke, is an parasite which lives in the liver of the sheep and other cattle. So these are the parasitic. Most of them are parasitic, some are free. Examples are planaria, liver fluke, tapeworm. So first three phylums, Porifera, Coelenterata, Platyhelminthes we have seen. Now next we're going to this Nematoda. Let us see what is this Nematoda. It is a bit higher to this Platyhelminthes, which shows some kind of gradual difference, that is the gradual higher level. There is a little bit of higher level of differentiation in their body structures. Let us look at the other phylums. So Nematoda is the next phylum. We have seen about Porifera, Coelenterata, Platyhelminthes. Let us see what kind of developments are there from this Platyhelminthes to this Nematoda. Here also you see the bilateral symmetry, which is already seen in Platyhelminthes. If the organism is exactly divided into two, if you cut it into two halves, the left and right will be similar. That is bilateral symmetry, triploblastic and cylindrical. So here the Platyhelminthes are flat, bilaterally compressed. Dorsoventrally they are compressed. But whereas the Nematoda are round worms, round like a cylinder. These are parasitic in nature. Here they have got developed tissues but no real organs. Organs are not well developed in their bodies. Only tissues are well developed. So tissues are the development from the Platyhelminthes to here. They are round. Example, roundworms and pinworms. These are intestinal parasitic worms which are commonly a problem for small children. Small children, they complain that they're getting stomach ache. This happens because of when they eat a lot of sugar and when they eat with untidy hands, the eggs of these roundworms and pinworms may go to their intestines and they develop and they grow in the intestines in large number. They feed on the food they eat, they consume. The candies and sugar what they consume, they feed on that particular foods and they grow large number and they cause the stomach ache and all. So doctors suggest to take certain kind of medicine which will kill these worms in the intestines. So you might have experienced this kind of problems at your childhood, roundworms and pinworms. The pinworms, they have got a pin-like of structure which will cause irritation at your anus at the end point. They pinch with the pin and creates a kind of a irritation. So those are also the parasitic worms. And these are not very serious. Roundworms and pinworms are not so serious. They doesn't cause such a serious problems. But whereas the other kind of roundworms, other kind of nematode worms like Ochraria bancrofti, this is a very dangerous roundworm. This is a very dangerous nematode which causes a disease called elephantiasis. You might have seen some people having a leg which is swollen to the size of an elephant leg, carrying a heavy leg. So it is because of a worm called nematode Ochraria bancrofti. It causes a disease named as elephantiasis. So this is all about the nematoda. Next, go to the Annelida, another group. In Annelida, we see that bilateral symmetry, triploblastic, as like nematode and Platyhelminthes. These annelids, they have a true body cavity. This is the additional development we see from nematode to Annelida. True body cavity, and organs are developed here. You can see that organs, distinct organs. So when you study biology, you take up, when you go for a dissection, first you will be asked to dissect a earthworm, because this is the first group which is having organs. So by cutting that, you will explore the organ, the digestive system of the earthworm. Earthworm is an annelidan. And what else you observe? Segmentation. Body will be having segments. If you see an earthworm picture, the body will be having segments like this. If you see the body of an earthworm, it will be like this. So this is called as segmentation. Body is segmented. You can count the segments. Example, earthworms and leeches. Leeches are the parasitic annelidians. Leeches, they feed on the blood of animals, cattle which go into the water. Basically, they live in the ponds and the stagnated water and they suck the blood. Earthworms, you know, they live in the moist soil and in the burrows. So this is about the Annelida. Next, move to the another group, Arthropoda. Now let us look at the another phylum, Arthropoda. The Arthropoda, they contain the bilateral symmetry and segmented bodies. As like the annelidans, they have the segmented body, and the coelomic cavity is blood filled. The coelomic cavity has got the blood. Of course, the blood is not red in color, but Arthropoda, they have got the blood which is in different colors. In some cases, it is white in color. That is the case of a cockroach. So it is colorless, maybe colored in different colors. So this is a blood filled. they have jointed legs. This is the most important or prominent feature by which we can identify arthropoda. Jointed legs, and they have exoskeleton. The skeleton is present outside their bodies, and the more specific character is jointed legs. If you see the legs of a cockroach, you can find the legs like this. You will find legs like this. So you can see the joints outside. This is the jointed leg, and they have an exoskeleton. Examples: all the insects, houseflies, cockroaches, mosquitoes, they come under this arthropoda. Even the crabs and scorpions, they fall under this arthropoda. The next one is mollusca. Here in mollusks, the coelomic cavity is reduced and they have little segmentation. They have open circulatory system. Mollusca has got open circulatory system, and moreover they have got certain distinct organs like kidneys for excretion. They have development of kidneys for excretion, and whereas they have a foot-like organ for the movement. So that is what we see in mollusca. And if you see the next one, Echinodermata. Echinodermata, they have spiny skinned. Echinodermata means hedgehog. The meaning of Echinodermata is hedgehog. Means their surface, their skin is covered by some hard spine or thorn-like materials present on their skin. They have special water-driven tube-like system in their bodies. Special water-driven tube-like system is found in Echinodermata, and their bodies are covered by a hard skeleton which is made up of calcium carbonate. So that is the other feature found in Echinodermata. And here the examples are starfish and sea urchins are examples of these Echinodermata. So these are the different groups here which we studied after this platyhelminthes: nematoda, annelida, arthropoda, mollusca, Echinodermata. So here in the mollusca we can see the examples as a snail. Snail is an example of mollusks we can take. So we completed these invertebrate organisms. Now we are going to study about this chordata. So we are going to study about the chordata. So this chordata, it consists of protochordata and vertebrata. Vertebrata, they consist of pisces, amphibians, reptiles, aves, and finally the mammals. Let us see. Now let us talk about the chordates, the chordata. It has got two major groups, protochordata and vertebrata. Let us see the protochordata first. So these are the organisms. The protochordata are marine organisms. They live in water. They have the coelomic cavity and they have this body differentiation. They have bilateral symmetry, as like the previous invertebrates what we discussed there about the Echinodermata or Annelida or Arthropoda. The same kind of features they show. In addition to that, the protochordata, they show one additional feature called as presence of notochord. So what is this notochord? It is a supporting cord or a string. Supporting string. Where is this string found? If this is the organism, in its body there is a supporting string on the back side. So this is called as notochord, and this notochord is separating the nervous tissue and the gut. Gut means the digestive system. So the digestive area and the nervous area are separated by a supportive structure called as notochord. So this notochord, it runs at the back through the entire length of the organism, which is a distinct or a special feature which is observed only in the protochordata. So this is the notochord which will separate the nervous tissue and the gut. And this notochord, it provides a place for the attachment of muscles for easy movement. So that is the development which is observed first in this protochordata group. Here examples are Balanoglossus, Amphioxus and Hadmania. So these are the examples of this protochordata. So the protochordata, they have the noticeable feature, that is the presence of notochord. But here the protochordates may not, all the protochordates may not have the notochord throughout their life. At least in some stages of their life, they will be having this notochord. In some cases, they will be having at certain length of their body, not throughout their body. It doesn't, okay, it means that all protochordates do not have a complete notochord throughout their life. Certain protochordates may have the notochord in only certain specific stages of their life. Now let us come to the vertebrata. Let us talk about the vertebrates. So these vertebrates, they have the real vertebral column. All the vertebrates, Pisces, amphibia, reptiles, aves, mammalia, these are very familiar animals which we see around us. You see a fish, you know the fish has got a vertebral column, backbone. You know that amphibia, frog, it has got a backbone, vertebral column. Reptilia, lizards and squirrels and lizards, snakes, they have the specific vertebral column. Birds, they have vertebral column. Mammals, they have a vertebral column. So here we notice the first point, vertebral column, and they have an inner skeleton, endoskeleton, and well-defined muscle and bone joints. We have well-defined muscle and bone joints. Proper muscle movements, coordinated muscle movements are found here in case of vertebrates. We have bilateral symmetry as like other animals. Bilateral symmetry is found in vertebrates, and coelom is found, and triploblastic notochord. Along with that, a narrow cord is also found. Notochord and narrow cord are found in this vertebrates. So the vertebrata is divided into 5 classes. You see that Pisces, amphibians, reptilia, aves, and mammalia. So they have got distinct features. Let us see what are these 5 groups that come under this vertebrates. So now let us see that the first one, Pisces, all the fishes, they come under this group. What are the features we observe? Their bodies are covered by scales and they breathe through gills. They have gill pouches, they have gills through which they carry out the respiration. These are cold-blooded animals. Fishes are cold-blooded. So you know what is cold-blooded and warm-blooded. Warm-blooded animals, they have to maintain a specific temperature, specific body temperature. So their blood will be maintaining that specific body temperature. Cold-blooded animals means their bodies are adjusted to the temperature of the environment in which they are living. So cold-blooded animals, the fishes, and their bodies are, they contain the skeleton which is made up of either cartilage in case of shark, whereas in case of tuna and rohu, the cartilage, the skeleton is made up of cartilage as well as bone. So this is observed, and these fishes, they lay eggs in water. That is the mode of reproduction. They lay the eggs in water. Now let us see the second one, amphibians, amphibia. These are the organisms that live mostly in water, and even they can live on land. They have gills as well as lungs to breathe. Amphibians, gills and lungs to breathe. You can get the features when you know the animals which fall under this. Frogs, salamanders. They fall under this category, frogs and salamanders. They lay the eggs in water, no scales on body, either by gills or lungs. So gills are seen in their tadpole stage. They have gills. When they are grown up, they have lungs and moist skin. So this is observed in frogs. Pisces, they are double chambered heart. They have a 2-chambered heart. Pisces. Amphibia, they have a 3-chambered heart. So they have Pisces have a 2-chambered heart. They have a 3-chambered heart. So that is the difference we see. Now next we go to the reptilia. Reptiles. So what are reptiles? Lizard, snake, turtle, crocodiles, all these come under reptilia. Their bodies are covered by dry scales. Dry scales. Skin is dry. Whereas in case of, you see, fishes, the scales having mucus, wet, because they live in water. The reptiles, their scales are dry. They have dry scales. Especially in the garden lizard, you see the dry scales they have. Turtle and crocodiles, they live in the water partly. Of course, even though they live, they do not lay their eggs in the water like amphibia and pisces. Lay eggs outside. Outside in the sense not in water. Their eggs will be having a hard shell. So that is the feature we observe. Lizards, snakes, turtles and crocodiles, mostly they crawl. They cannot walk and run. They crawl because their body weight is higher, heavier than the strength of their legs. So that is the reason they keep all their weight on their stomach and they crawl on the ground. These are the reptiles. So these reptiles, they have a 3-chambered heart. Crocodiles have 4-chambered heart. Certain reptiles have partially 4-chambered heart. So that is, the heart is 3 or 4-chambered heart. Whereas here 2-chambered, here 3-chambered heart. Now the next one, aves. Aves are nothing but the birds. The birds, they fall under this category. Aves, their bodies are covered by feathers. And the distinct feature which differentiate the aves from other 3 groups is they are warm-blooded, as like mammals, warm-blooded. That means they need to maintain their body temperatures at a specific, they maintain a specific temperature in their bodies, that is warm-blooded animals. Their bodies are covered by feathers and their bodies, they have a skeleton which is very light. Most of the aves, they have the ability of flight. So that is observed, and they breathe through lungs and they lay eggs. And these eggs will be having a hard shell and which has to be incubated to make it into a baby. So that is the characteristic features of the aves. So finally we go to the mammals. Mammalia or mammals. So what are the characteristic features of mammals? Hairs on their bodies. Hairs on the body. In case of pisces, scales are there. Amphibia, there is no scale but wet skin is there. Reptilia, there are scales but most cases they are dry. Aves, they have feathers. Mammals, they have hairs on their bodies. Mammals are warm-blooded. Warm-blooded. Mammals give birth to young ones. This is a special character. Give birth to young ones. Young ones. They have mammary glands which produce milk to feed the young ones. Mammals, they have mammary glands, milk glands which produce milk to feed the young ones. They have hairs on their body. They are warm-blooded. They give birth to the young ones. Whereas the other cases, all these animals, they are laying eggs. Means the baby is developed outside their bodies. The egg is laid out, development of the baby takes place in the environment. In these cases, whereas in mammals, development of the baby takes place inside the body. Once the baby is completely developed, birth takes place. So that is what observed in this mammalia. So all the higher animals like humans, dogs, cats, horses and tigers, so all these animals are mammals. So here we included all these animals which give birth to the young ones into this mammalia. There are some exceptions like duck-billed platypus. So this platypus, it is a mammal. It is considered as a mammal because of other features like having hairs on the body. It is warm-blooded. It gives milk to the young ones, but it doesn't give birth to the young ones. It lays eggs. And even if you take kangaroo, kangaroo is also a mammal. It is having hair on its body. It feeds the young ones, but it gives birth to a young one which is a premature baby, and it carries the premature baby in its pouch till the baby is completely developed. Even you see in many cases like rats, they will give birth to the very small rats which cannot see and which cannot move even. They are not completely developed. So after they are born, they feed for a few days, then later they will develop the body parts and they'll be able to move. So in such a way, certain exceptions are there, but in most cases they give birth to the completely developed young ones, and that is observed in mammals. Nomenclature, naming of organisms, plants and animals. In general terms, we call these plants and animals with general names. You call tiger, dog, cat, man. So this is the name which is you are using English language to call the animal, but in Hindi or any other language, regional languages, it will be called with different names. So it leads to confusion. So the organisms must be having a proper scientific name. So the scientific name will be having two parts: genus name, first genus name, then species name. So both the names are Latin words, they are not from English. So the Latin words are accepted over the world. All people around the world accepted that organisms can have both the names, genus name and species name, as Latin words. So it will be uniform throughout the world. Otherwise, if it is in English or if it is in Hindi, there will be a problem for the other people, those who do not know the languages. So the Latin words, they make up the two parts of the name of an organism. One is the genus name, second one is the species name. The first one, it tells about the genus of the organism. The second thing, it tells about the particular species of that organism. So this kind of scientific naming of organisms, it was introduced by a person called as Carolus Linnaeus in 18th century. So when you are writing the scientific names of organisms, you need to follow certain conventions. What are they? The first thing, the name of the genus begins with a capital letter. You should begin the genus name with a capital letter. Second one, the name of the species begins with a small letter. Species should be small letter. There are two parts in the name. One is genus name. While starting the genus name, the first letter of the genus name should be a capital. If you are printing this name, it should be in italics. If you are writing with your hand, if it is done in a handwritten, then the genus name and species name should be underlined separately. You have to underline separately. Right? So if you have taken any of the scientific name, neem, Azadirachta indica. So they have to be separately underlined. This is the scientific name of the neem tree. So here we have seen about the organisms, the diversity. And basically in this particular chapter, we studied about the classification of the whole organisms into what are the kingdoms they are divided, and in the kingdoms and what are the subgroups, the plantae, animal kingdom, and animal kingdom, what are the chordates and invertebrates. So every phylum with examples we have studied, and the scientific naming. So this will be a very useful information while studying the organisms in groups. Help us, gives us the information. If you study one particular organism of a particular group, then you will come to know, you will identify the similarities in the other organisms of the group. So by that you can study the organisms well with the help of this classification of organisms.